The dodo, Rhapis cucullatus, is an extinct flightless bird that was endemic to the island of Mauritius, east of Madagascar, in the Indian Ocean. Its closest genetic relative was the also extinct Rodriguez solitaire, the two forming the subfamily Raphina of the family of pigeons and doves. The closest living relative of the dodo is the Nicobar pigeon. A white dodo was once incorrectly thought to have existed on the nearby island of Reunion. Subfossil remains show the dodo was about 1 metre, 3.3 feet, tall, and may have weighed 10-18 kilograms, 20-40 pounds, in the wild. The dodo's appearance in life is evidenced only by drawings, paintings, and written accounts from the 17th century. Because these vary considerably, and because only some illustrations are known to have been drawn from live specimens, its exact appearance in life remains unresolved. Similarly, little is known with certainty about its habitat and behavior. It has been depicted with brownish-grey plumage, yellow feet, a tuft of tail feathers, a grey, naked head, and a black, yellow, and green beak. It used gizzard stones to help digest its food, which is thought to have included fruits, and its main habitat is believed to have been the woods in the drier coastal areas of Mauritius. One account states its clutch consisted of a single egg. It is presumed that the dodo became flightless because of the ready availability of abundant food sources, and a relative absence of predators on Mauritius. The first recorded mention of the dodo was by Dutch sailors in 1598. In the following years, the bird was hunted by sailors, their domesticated animals, and invasive species introduced during that time. The last widely accepted sighting of a dodo was in 1662. Its extinction was not immediately noticed, and some considered it to be a mythical creature. In the 19th century, research was conducted on a small quantity of remains of 4 specimens that had been brought to Europe in the early 17th century. Among these is a dried head, the only soft tissue of the dodo that remains today. Since then, a large amount of subfossil material has been collected from Mauritius, mostly from the Mauritius swamp. The extinction of the dodo within less than a century of its discovery called attention to the previously unrecognized problem of human involvement in the disappearance of entire species. The dodo achieved widespread recognition from its role in the story of Alice in Wonderland, and it has since become a fixture in popular culture, often as a symbol of extinction and obsolescence. It is frequently used as a mascot on Mauritius. Taxonomy. 1848 lithograph of the Oxford specimen skull. The dodo had variously been declared a small ostrich, a rail, an albatross, or a vulture by 19th century scientists. In 1842, Johannes Theodor Reinhardt proposed that dodos were ground pigeons, based on studies of a dodo skull he had discovered in the Royal Danish Collection at Copenhagen. This view was met with ridicule, but was later supported by Hugh Edwin Strickland and Alexander Gordon Melville in their 1848 monograph The Dodo and Its Kindred, which attempted to separate myth from reality. After dissecting the preserved head and foot of the specimen at the Oxford University Museum and comparing it with the few remains then available of the extinct Rodriguez solitaire, Pezophyps solitaria, they concluded that the two were closely related. Strickland stated that although not identical, these birds shared many distinguishing features of the leg bones, otherwise known only in pigeons. The dodo was anatomically similar to pigeons in many features. Strickland pointed to the very short keratinous portion of the beak, with its long, slender, naked basal part. Other pigeons also have bare skin around their eyes, almost reaching their beak, as in dodos. The forehead was high in relation to the beak, and the nostril was located low on the middle of the beak and surrounded by skin, a combination of features shared only with pigeons. The legs of the dodo were generally more similar to those of terrestrial pigeons than of other birds, both in their scales and in their skeletal features. Depictions of the large crop hinted at a relationship with pigeons, in which this feature is more developed than in other birds. Pigeons generally have very small clutches, and the dodo is said to have laid a single egg. Like pigeons, the dodo lacked the vomer and septum of the nostrils, and it shared details in the mandible, the zygomatic bone, the palate, and the hallux. The dodo differed from other pigeons mainly in the small size of the wings and the large size of the beak in proportion to the rest of the cranium. Sketch of the Oxford specimen head, before its dissection. Throughout the 19th century, several species were classified as congeneric with the dodo, including the Rodriguez solitaire and the Reunion solitaire as Dodo solitarius and Draphus solitarius, respectively, Dodo and Draphus being names for the dodo genus used by different authors of the time. An atypical 17th century description of a dodo and bones found on Rodriguez, now known to have belonged to the Rodriguez solitaire, led Abraham D. Bartlett to name a new species, Dodo nazarensis, in 1852. Based on solitaire remains, it is now a synonym of that species. Crude drawings of the red rail of Mauritius were also misinterpreted as dodo species, Dodo broekii and Dodo herberti. Evolution. For many years the dodo and the Rodriguez solitaire were placed in a family of their own, the Rhaphidae, formerly Dodo, because their exact relationships with other pigeons were unresolved. Each was placed in its own monotypic family, Rhaphidae, and Paezophapida, respectively, as it was thought that they had evolved their similar features independently. Osteological and molecular data has since led to the dissolution of the family Rhaphidae, and the dodo and solitaire are now placed in their own subfamily, Rhaphina, in the family Columbidae. Comparison of mitochondrial cytochrome B and 12S sequences isolated from a dodo tarsal and a Rodriguez solitaire femur confirmed their close relationship and their placement within the Columbidae. The genetic evidence was interpreted as showing the Southeast Asian Nicobar pigeon to be their closest living relative, followed by the crown pigeons of New Guinea and the superficially dodo-like tooth-billed pigeon from Samoa. The generic name of the latter is Dodunculus, little dodo, and it was called dodelet by Richard Owen. The following cladogram from Shapiro and colleagues, 2002, shows the dodo's closest relationships within the Columbidae, a clade consisting of generally ground-dwelling island endemics. A similar cladogram was published in 2007, inverting the placement of Gora and Dicunculus, and including the pheasant pigeon and the thick-billed ground pigeon at the base of the clade. The 2002 study indicated that the ancestors of the solitaire and the dodo diverged around the Paleogene boundary. The Mascarene Islands, Mauritius, Reunion, and Rodriguez, are of volcanic origin, and are less than 10 million years old. Therefore, the ancestors of both birds probably remained capable of flight for a considerable time after the separation of their lineage. The lack of mammalian herbivores competing for resources on these islands allowed the solitaire and the dodo to attain very large sizes. The DNA obtained from the Oxford specimen is degraded, and no usable DNA has been extracted from subfossil remains, so these findings still need to be independently verified. The dodo lost the ability to fly due to the lack of mammalian predators on Mauritius. Another large, flightless pigeon, the VT leva giant pigeon, Natuneornis gigaura, was described in 2001, from subfossil material from Fiji. It was only slightly smaller than the dodo and the solitaire, and it too is thought to have been related to the crown pigeons. Etymology. Landscape with birds, showing a dodo, in the lower right, by Royal and Savory, 1628. One of the original names for the dodo was the Dutch wolvagel, first used in the Journal of Vice Admiral Wybrand van Norwich, who visited Mauritius during the Second Dutch expedition to Indonesia in 1598. His description, translated into English in 1599, explained the meaning of the name as follows. On their left hand was a little island which they named Heemskirk Island, and the bay itself they called Warwick Bay, finding in this place great quantity of fowls twice as big as swans, which they call wallstocks or wallabirds, being very good meat. But finding an abundance of pigeons and Papanese parrots, they disdained any more to eat those great fowls, calling them wallow birds, that is to say loathsome or fulsome birds. Labelled sketch from 1634, by Sir Thomas Herbert, showing a broad-billed parrot, Cockatoo, a red rail, hen, and a dodo. Another account from that voyage, perhaps the first to mention the dodo, states that the Portuguese referred to them as penguins. The meaning may not have been derived from penguin, the Portuguese referred to them as vatilicaos at the time, but from pinion, a reference to the small wings. The crew of the Dutch ship Gelderland referred to the bird as dronte, meaning swollen, in 1602, a name that is still used in some languages. This crew also called them Graffien tan Kermisgans in reference to fowl fattened for the Kermesse festival in Amsterdam, which was held the day after they anchored on Mauritius. The etymology of the word dodo is unclear. Some ascribe it to the Dutch word dodel for sluggard, but it is more probably related to dodars, which means either fat arse or knot arse, referring to the knot of feathers on the hind end. The first record of the word dodars is in Captain Willem van Westsaenen's journal in 1602. The English writer Sir Thomas Herbert was the first to use the word dodo in print in his 1634 travelogue, claiming it was referred to as such by the Portuguese, who had visited Mauritius in 1507. Another Englishman, Emmanuel Altham, had used the word in a 1628 letter, in which he also claimed the origin was Portuguese. The name dodar was introduced into English at the same time as dodo, but was only used until the 18th century. As far as is known, the Portuguese never mentioned the bird. Nevertheless, some sources still state that the word dodo derives from the Portuguese word daudo, currently doido, meaning fool or crazy. It has also been suggested that dodo was an onomatopoeic approximation of the bird's call, a two-note pigeon-like sound resembling doo-doo. The Latin name cucullatus, hooded, was first used by Juan Eusebio Nuremberg in 1635 as Cygnus cucullatus, in reference to Carolus Clusius' 1605 depiction of a dodo. In his 18th century classic work Systema Naturae, Carl Linnaeus used cucullatus as a specific name, but combined it with the genus name Struthiol, ostrich. Mather and Jacques Brisson coined the genus name Rhaphis, referring to the bustards, in 1760, resulting in the current name Rhaphis cucullatus. In 1766, Linnaeus coined the new binomial Didoineptus, meaning inept dodo. This has become a synonym of the earlier name, because of nomenclatural priority. Description: Dodo among Indian birds, by Ustad Mansour, ca. 1625. As no complete dodo specimens exist, its external appearance, such as plumage and coloration, is hard to determine. Illustrations and written accounts of encounters with the dodo, between its discovery and its extinction, 1598-1662, are the primary evidence for its external appearance. According to most representations, the dodo had grayish or brownish plumage, with lighter primary feathers, and a tuft of curly light feathers high on its rear end. The head was gray and naked, the beak green, black and yellow, and the legs were stout and yellowish, with black claws. Subfossil remains and remnants of the birds that were brought to Europe in the 17th century show that they were very large birds, 1 meter, 3.3 feet. Tall, and possibly weighing up to 23 kilograms, 51 pounds. The higher weights have been attributed to birds in captivity. Weights in the wild were estimated to have been in the range 10.6-21.1 kilogram, 23.47 pounds. A later estimate gives an average weight as low as 10.2 kilograms, 22 pounds. This has been questioned, and there is still some controversy. It has been suggested that the weight depended on the season, and that individuals were fat during cool seasons, but less so during hot. The bird was sexually dimorphic, males were larger and had proportionally longer beaks. The beak was up to 23 centimeters, 9.1 in length, and had a hook point. A study of the few remaining feathers on the Oxford specimen head showed that they were pennaceous rather than plumaceous, downy, and most similar to those of other pigeons. Many of the skeletal features that distinguish the dodo, and the Rodriguez solitaire, its closest relative, from pigeons have been attributed to their flightlessness. The pelvic elements were thicker than those of flighted pigeons to support the higher weight, and the pectoral region and the small wings were pedomorphic, meaning that they were underdeveloped and retained juvenile features. The skull, trunk and pelvic limbs were metamorphic, meaning that they changed considerably with age. The dodo shared several other traits with the Rodriguez solitaire, such as features of the skull, pelvis, and sternum, as well as their large size. It differed in other aspects, such as being more robust and shorter than the solitaire, having a larger skull and beak, a rounded skull roof, and smaller orbits. The dodo's neck and legs were proportionally shorter, and it did not possess an equivalent to the knob present on the solitaire's wrists. Contemporary descriptions. Most contemporary descriptions of the dodo are found in ship's logs and journals of the Dutch East India Company vessels that docked in Mauritius when the Dutch Empire ruled the island. These records were used as guides for future voyages. Few contemporary accounts are reliable, as many seem to be based on earlier accounts, and none were written by scientists. One of the earliest accounts, from Van Warwick's 1598 journal, describes the bird thus. Painting of a dodo head by Cornelis Saft-Leven, from 1638. The last original depiction. Blue parrots are very numerous there, as well as other birds, among which are a kind, conspicuous for their size, larger than our swans, with huge heads only half covered with skin, as if clothed with a hood. These birds lack wings, in the place of which 3 or 4 blackish feathers protrude. The tail consists of a few soft and curved feathers, which are ash-colored. These we used to call Waldvogel, for the reason that the longer and oftener they were cooked, the less soft and more insipid eating they became. Nevertheless, their belly and breast were of a pleasant flavor, and easily masticated. One of the most detailed descriptions is by Sir Thomas Herbert in a relation of some Yeris Travail into Afrique, and the Greaterasia, from 1634, first here only, and in Digaroas Rodriguez, likely referring to the solitaires generated the dodo, which for shape and rareness may antagonize the phoenix of Arabia. Her body is round and fat, few weigh less than 50 pounds. It is reputed more for wonder than for food. Greasy stomachs may seek after them, but to the delicate they are offensive, and of no nourishment. Her visage darts forth melancholy, as sensible of nature's injury, in framing so great a body to be guided with complement all wings, so small and impotent, that they serve only to prove her bird. The half of her head is naked, seeming covered with a fine veil. Her bill is crooked downwards. In midst is the trill nostril, from which part to the end is a light green, mixed with pale yellow tincture. Her eyes are small, and like to diamonds, round, and rolling. Her clothing downy feathers, her train 3 small plumes, short and unproportionable, her legs suiting her body, her pounces sharp, her appetite strong and greedy. Stones and iron are digested, which description will better be conceived in her representation. Contemporary depictions. Compilation of the Gelderland sketches, from 1601, of live and recently killed dodos. The Travel Journal of the Dutch ship Gelderland, 1601-1603, rediscovered in the 1860s, contains the only known sketches of living or recently killed specimens drawn on Mauritius. They have been attributed to the professional artist Joris Justin Tlayerley, who also drew other now extinct Mauritian birds, and to a second, less refined artist. Apart from these sketches, it is unknown how many of the 20 or so 17th century illustrations of the dodos were drawn from life, or from stuffed specimens, which affects their reliability. All post-1638 depictions appear to be based on earlier images. Around the time reports mentioning dodos became rarer. Differences in the depictions led authors such as Anthony Cornelis Aldemans and Masayuji Hachisuka to speculate about sexual dimorphism, ontogenic traits, seasonal variation, and even the existence of different species, but these theories are not accepted today. Because details such as markings of the beak, the form of the tail feathers, and coloration vary from account to account, it is impossible to determine the exact morphology of these features, whether they signal age or sex, or if they even reflect reality. Dodo specialist Julian Hume argued that the nostrils of the living dodo would have been slits, as seen in the Gelderland, Cornelis Saft-Leven, Crocker Art Gallery, and Ustad Mansour images. According to this claim, the gaping nostrils often seen in paintings indicate that taxidermy specimens were used as models. The famous Edward's Dodo, painted by Royal and Savory in 1626. The traditional image of the dodo is of a very fat and clumsy bird, but this view may be exaggerated. The general opinion of scientists today is that many old European depictions were based on overfed captive birds or crudely stuffed specimens. It has also been suggested that the images might show dodos with puffed feathers as part of display behavior. The Dutch painter Royal and Savory was the most prolific and influential illustrator of the dodo, having made at least 10 depictions, often showing it in the lower corners. A famous painting of his from 1626, now called Edward's Dodo, as it was once owned by the ornithologist George Edwards, has since become the standard image of a dodo. It is housed in the Natural History Museum, London. The image shows a particularly fat bird, and is the source for many other dodo illustrations. An Indian mug-owl painting rediscovered in St. Petersburg in the 1950s shows a dodo, along with native Indian birds. It depicts a slimmer, brownish bird, and its discoverer A.E. Wanao and dodo specialist Julian Hume regard it as one of the most accurate depictions of the living dodo. The surrounding birds are clearly identifiable and depicted with appropriate coloring. It is believed to be from the 17th century and has been attributed to artist Ustad Mansour. The bird depicted probably lived in the menagerie of Mughal Emperor Jahangir, located in Surat, where English traveller Peter Mundy also claimed to have seen dodos. Behaviour and ecology. Dodo preening itself in a Royal and Savory painting. From 1626. Little is known of the behavior of the dodo, as most contemporary descriptions are very brief. Based on weight estimates, it has been suggested the male could reach the age of 21, and the female 17. Studies of the cantilever strength of its leg bones indicate that it could run quite fast. Unlike the Rodriguez solitaire, there is no evidence that the dodo used its wings in intraspecific combat. Though some dodo bones have been found with healed fractures, it had weak pectoral muscles and more reduced wings in comparison. The dodo may instead have used its large hook beak in territorial disputes. Since Mauritius receives more rainfall and has less seasonal variation than Rodriguez, which would have affected the availability of resources on the island, the dodo would have less reason to evolve aggressive territorial behavior. The Rodriguez solitaire was therefore probably the more aggressive of the two. 1601 map of a bay on Mauritius. The small d on the far right side marks where dodos were found. The preferred habitat of the dodo is unknown, but old descriptions suggest that it inhabited the woods on the drier coastal areas of South and West Mauritius. This view is supported by the fact that the Mauritius swamp is close to the sea in southeastern Mauritius. Such a limited distribution across the island could well have contributed to its extinction. A 1601 map from the Gelderland Journal shows a small island off the coast of Mauritius where dodos were caught. Julian Hume has suggested this island was in Tamarin Bay, on the west coast of Mauritius. Subfossil bones have also been found inside caves in highland areas, indicating that it once occurred on mountains. Work at the Mauritius swamp has shown that its habitat was dominated by Tambalakak and Bandanistries and endemic palms. Many endemic species of Mauritius became extinct after the arrival of humans, so the ecosystem of the island is badly damaged and hard to reconstruct. Before humans arrived, Mauritius was entirely covered in forests, but very little remains of them today, because of deforestation. The surviving endemic fauna is still seriously threatened. The dodo lived alongside other recently extinct Mauritian birds such as the flightless red rail, the broad-billed parrot, the mascarene grey parakeet, the Mauritius blue pigeon, the Mauritius owl, the mascarene coot, the Mauritian shelduck, the Mauritian duck, and the Mauritius night heron. Extinct Mauritian reptiles include the saddle-backed Mauritius giant tortoise, the domed Mauritius giant tortoise, the Mauritian giant skink, and the round island burrowing boa. The small Mauritian flying fox, and the snail Tropidophora carinata lived on Mauritius and Reunion, but vanished from both islands. Some plants, such as Caseria adenifolia and the palm orchid, have also become extinct. Diet: Perseus and Andromeda with the dodo and seashells by Gilisonde Coite, 1627. A 1631 Dutch document, rediscovered in 1887, but now lost, is the only account of the dodo's diet, and also mentions that it used its beak for defense. These mares are superb and proud. They display themselves to us with stiff and stern faces, and wide open mouths. Jaunty and audacious of gait, they would scarcely move a foot before us. Their war weapon was their mouth, with which they could bite fiercely. Their food was fruit. They were not well feathered but abundantly covered with fat. Many of them were brought on board to the delight of us all. In addition to fallen fruits, the dodo probably subsisted on nuts, seeds, bulbs, and roots. It has also been suggested that the dodo might have eaten crabs and shellfish like their relatives the crown pigeons. Its feeding habits must have been versatile, since captive specimens were probably given a wide range of food on the long sea journeys. Anthony Aldemont suggested that as Mauritius has marked dry and wet seasons, the dodo probably fattened itself on ripe fruits at the end of the wet season to survive the dry season, when food was scarce. Contemporary reports described the bird's greedy appetite. Franz Staub suggested that they mainly fed on palm fruits, and he attempted to correlate the fat cycle of the dodo with the fruiting regime of the palms. Dodo and its gizzard stone by Carolus Glucius, from 1605, copied from an illustration in the Journal of Van Neck. Several contemporary sources state that the dodo used gizzard stones to aid digestion. The English writer Sir Heyman Lestrange witnessed a live bird in London, and described it as follows: about 1638, as I walked London streets, I saw the picture of a strange-looking fowl hung out upon a cloth, and myself with one or two more in company went in to see it. It was kept in a chamber, and was a great fowl somewhat bigger than the largest turkey cock, and so legged and footed, but stouter and thicker, and of more erect shape, colored before like the breast of a young cock pheasant, and on the back of a dun or drier color. The keeper called it a dodo, and in the endy of a chimney in the chamber there lay a heap of large pebble stones, whereof he gave it many in our sight, some as big as nutmegs, and the keeper told us that she eats them, conducing to digestion, and though I remember not how far the keeper was questioned therein, yet I am confident that afterwards she cast them all again. It is not known how the young were fed, but related pigeons provide crop milk. Contemporary depictions show a large crop, which was probably used to add space for food storage, and to produce crop milk. It has been suggested that the maximum size attained by the dodo and the solitaire was limited by the amount of crop milk they could produce for their young during early growth. Tambala cock seeds at the dodo exhibition at Naturalis. In 1973, the tambala cock, also known as the dodo tree, was thought to be dying out on Mauritius, to which it is endemic. There were supposedly only 13 specimens left, all estimated to be about 300 years old. Stanley Temple hypothesized that it depended on the dodo for its propagation, and that its seeds would germinate only after passing through the bird's digestive tract. He claimed that the tambala cock was now nearly co-extinct because of the disappearance of the dodo. Temple overlooked reports from the 1940s that found that tambala cock seeds germinated, albeit very early, without being abraded during digestion. Others have contested his hypothesis, and suggested that the decline of the tree was exaggerated, or seeds were also distributed by other extinct animals such as Chelandraspis tortoises, fruit bats, or the broad-billed parrot. According to Wendy Strom and Anthony Cheek, two experts in the ecology of the Mascarene Islands, the tree, while rare, has germinated since the demise of the dodo and numbers several hundred, not 13 as claimed by Temple, hence discrediting Temple's view as to the dodo and the tree's sole survival relationship. It has been suggested that the broad-billed parrot may have depended on dodos and Chelandraspis tortoises to eat palm fruits and excrete their seeds, which became food for the parrots. Anodorhynchus macaws depended on now extinct South American megafauna in the same way, but now rely on domesticated cattle for this service. Reproduction. Savory sketch of 3 dodos from c. 1626, Crocker Art Gallery. As it was flightless and terrestrial, and there were no mammalian predators, or other kinds of natural enemy on Mauritius, the dodo probably nested on the ground. The account by François Couch, from 1651, is the only description of the egg and the call I have seen in Mauritius birds bigger than a swan, without feathers on the body, which is covered with a black down. The hinder part is round, the rump adorned with curled feathers as many in number as the bird is years old. In place of wings they have feathers, like these last, black and curved, without webs. They have no tongues, the beak is large, curving a little downwards, their legs are long, scaly, with only 3 toes on each foot. It has a cry like a gosling, and is by no means so savory to eat as the flamingo sand ducks, of which we have just spoken. They only lay 1 egg, which is white, the size of a halfpenny roll, by the side of which they place a white stone the size of a hen's egg. They lay on grass which they collect, and make their nest in the forests. If one kills their young one, a grey stone is found in the gizzard. We call them wassoden azaret. The fat is excellent to give ease to the muscles and nerves. Replica of an alleged dodo egg in a reconstructed nest, East London Museum. Koch's account is problematic, since it also mentions that the bird he was describing had 3 toes and no tongue, unlike dodos. This led some to believe that Couch was describing a new species of dodo, Dodo nazarensis. The description was most probably mingled with that of a cassowary, and Couch's writings have other inconsistencies. A mention of a young ostrich taken on board a ship in 1617 is the only other reference to a possible juvenile dodo. An egg claimed to be that of a dodo is stored in the Museum of East London, South Africa. It was donated by Marjorie Courtney Latimer, whose great aunt had received it from a captain, who claimed to have found it in a swamp on Mauritius. In 2010, the curator of the museum proposed using genetic studies to determine its authenticity. It may instead be an aberrant ostrich egg. Because of the possible single egg clutch, and the bird's large size, it has been proposed that the dodo was K-selected, meaning that it produced a low number of altricial offspring, which required parental care until they matured. Some evidence, including the large size, and the fact that tropical and frugivorous birds have slower growth rates, indicates that the bird may have had a protracted development period. The fact that no juvenile dodos have been found in the Mauritius swamp, where most dodo remains have been excavated, may indicate that they produce little offspring, that they matured rapidly, that the breeding grounds were far away from the swamp, or that the risk of miring was seasonal. Relationship with humans. 1601 engraving showing Dutch activities on the shore of Mauritius, and, at 2, on the left, the first published depiction of a dodo. Mauritius had previously been visited by Arab vessels in the Middle Ages and Portuguese ships between 1507 and 1513, but was settled by neither. No records of dodos by these are known, although the Portuguese name for Mauritius, Cerne, Swan Island, may have been a reference to dodos. The Dutch Empire acquired Mauritius in 1598, renaming it after Maurice of Nassau, and it was used for the provisioning of trade vessels of the Dutch East India Company henceforward. The earliest known descriptions of the dodo were provided by Dutch travelers during the Second Dutch expedition to Indonesia, led by Admiral Jacob van Eyck, in 1598. They appear in reports published in 1601, which also contain the first published illustration of the bird. Since the first sailors to visit Mauritius had been at sea for a long time, their interest in these large birds was mainly culinary. The 1602 journal by Willem van Westzanen, of the ship Brew Invis, mentions that 24 to 25 dodos were hunted for food, which were so large that 2 could scarcely be consumed at mealtime, their remains being preserved by salting. An illustration made for the 1648 published version of this journal, showing the killing of dodos, a dugong, and possibly a Thyro's grey parrot, was captioned with the Dutch poem, here in Hugh Strickland's translation. 1648 engraving showing the killing of dodos, center left, depicted as penguin-like, and other animals now extinct from Mauritius for food. The seamen hunt the flesh of feathered fowl, they tap the palms, and round-drumped dodos they destroy. The parrot's life they spare that he may peep, and howl, and thus his fellows to imprisonment decoy. Some early travelers found dodo meat unsavory, and preferred to eat parrots and pigeons. Others described it as tough but good. Some hunted dodos only for their gizzards, as this was considered the most delicious part of the bird. Dodos were easy to catch, but hunters had to be careful not to be bitten by their powerful beaks. The appearance of the dodo and the red ray led Peter Mundy to speculate, 230 years before Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, of these two sorts of fowl, Aphorum and Shawnede, for aught we yet know, not any to be found out of this island, which lieth about 100 leagues from St. Lawrence. A question may be demanded how they should be here and not elsewhere, being so farer from other land, and can neither fly or swim, whether by mixture of kins producing strange and monstrous forms, or the nature of the climate, air and earth in altering the first shapes in long time, or how. Dodos transported abroad. Painting of a specimen in the collection of Emperor Rudolph II in Prague, by Jacob Hefnagel, early 1600s. The dodo was found interesting enough that living specimens were sent to Europe and the East. The number of transported dodos that reached their destinations alive is uncertain, and it is unknown how they relate to contemporary depictions and the few non-fossil remains in European museums. Hyman Lestrange's description of a dodo that he saw in London in 1638 is the only account that specifically mentions a live specimen in Europe. In 1626 Adrian van de Ven drew a dodo that he claimed to have seen in Amsterdam, but he did not mention if it was alive, and his depiction is reminiscent of Savory's Edward's dodo. Two live specimens were seen by Peter Mundy in Surat, India, between 1628 and 1634, one of which may have been the individual painted by Ustad Mansour, around 1625. One dodo was sent as far as Nagasaki, Japan, in 1647, but it is unknown whether it arrived. In 1628, Emmanuel Altham visited Mauritius and sent a letter to his brother in England. Adrian van de Ven's 1626 depiction of a dodo Rightwo and Lovinge brother. We were ordered by ye said council to go to an island called Mauritius, lying in 20d. of South Latt, where we arrived ye 28th of May, this island having many goats, hogs, and cows upon it, and very strange fowls, called by ye Portingal's dodo, which for the rareness of the same, the like being not in ye world, but here, I have sent you one by Mr. Pearce, who did arrive with the ship William, at this island ye 10th of June. In the margin of the letter of Mr. Pearce you shall receive a jar of ginger for my sister, some babes for my cousins your daughters, and a bird called a dodo, if it live. Whether the dodo survived the journey is unknown, and the letter was destroyed by fire in the 19th century. The earliest known picture of a dodo specimen in Europe is from a ca. 1610 collection of paintings depicting animals in the Royal Menagerie of Emperor Rudolph II in Prague. This collection includes paintings of other Mauritian animals as well, including a red rail. The dodo, which may be a juvenile, seems to have been dried or embalmed and had probably lived in the Emperor's zoo for a while together with the other animals. That whole stuffed dodos were present in Europe indicates they had been brought alive and died there. It is unlikely that taxidermists were on board the visiting ships, and spirits were not yet used to preserve biological specimens. Most tropical specimens were preserved as dried heads and feet. Based on a combination of contemporary accounts, paintings, and specimens, Julian Hume has inferred that at least 11 transported dodos reached their destinations alive. Extinction. Savory's The Paradise from 1626, with a dodo in the lower right corner. Like many animals that evolved in isolation from significant predators, the dodo was entirely fearless of humans. This fearlessness and its inability to fly made the dodo easy prey for sailors. Although some scattered reports describe mass killings of dodos for ships' provisions, archaeological investigations have found scant evidence of human predation. Bones of at least 2 dodos were found in caves at Aedu Cap that sheltered fugitive slaves and convicts in the 17th century, and would not have been easily accessible to dodos because of the high, broken terrain. The human population on Mauritius, an area of 1,860 km2, or 720 square miles, never exceeded 50 people in the 17th century, but they introduced other animals, including dogs, pigs, cats, rats, and crab-eating macaques, which plundered dodo nests and competed for the limited food resources. At the same time, humans destroyed the dodo's forest habitat. The impact of these introduced animals, especially the pigs and macaques, on the dodo population is currently considered more severe than that of hunting. Rats were perhaps not much of a threat to the nests, since dodos would have been used to dealing with local land crabs. It has been suggested that the dodo may already have been rare or localized before the arrival of humans on Mauritius, since it would have been unlikely to become extinct so rapidly if it had occupied all the remote areas of the island. A 2005 expedition found subfossil remains of dodos and other animals killed by a flash flood. Such mass mortalities would have further jeopardized a species already in danger of becoming extinct. Frederick William Frohock's restoration from Rothschild's 1907 book Extinct Birds. Some controversy surrounds the date of their extinction. The last widely accepted record of a dodo sighting is the 1662 report by shipwrecked mariner Volker Teverts of the Dutch ship Arnhem, who described birds caught on a small islet off Mauritius, now suggested to be Amber Island. These animals on our coming up to them stared at us and remained quiet where they stand, not knowing whether they had wings to fly away or legs to run off, and suffering us to approach them as close as we pleased. Amongst these birds were those which in India they call Doderson, being a kind of very big goose. These birds are unable to fly, and instead of wings, they merely have a few small pins, yet they can run very swiftly. We drove them together into one place in such a manner that we could catch them with our hands, and when we held one of them by its leg, and that upon this it made a great noise, the others all on a sudden came running as fast as they could to its assistance, and by which they were caught and made prisoners also. Pieter van den Breckie 1617 drawing of a dodo, the one-horned sheep, and a red rail. The dodos on this islet may not necessarily have been the last members of the species. The last claimed sighting of a dodo was reported in the hunting records of Isaac Johannes Lamodius in 1688. Statistical analysis of these records by Robert Sansolo gives a new estimated extinction date of 1693, with a 95% confidence interval of 1688-1715. The authors also pointed out that because the last sighting, before 1662, was in 1638, the dodo was probably already quite rare by the 1660s, and thus a disputed report from 1674 by an escaped slave cannot be dismissed out of hand. Anthony Cheek pointed out that some descriptions after 1662 use the names dodo and dodas when referring to the red rail, indicating that they had been transferred to it after the disappearance of the dodo itself. Keck therefore points to the 1662 description as the last credible observation. A 1668 account by English traveller John Marshall, who used the names dodo and red hen interchangeably for the red rail, mentioned that the meat was hard, which echoes the description of the meat in the 1681 account. Even the 1662 account has been questioned by Errol Fuller, as the reaction to distress cries matches what was described for the red rail. Until this explanation was proposed, a description of dodos from 1681 was thought to be the last account, and that date still has proponents. It is unlikely the issue will ever be resolved unless late reports mentioning the name alongside a physical description are rediscovered. Liuc and Redless accepts Cheek's rationale for choosing the 1662 date, taking all subsequent reports to refer to red rails. In any case, the dodo was probably extinct by 1700, about a century after its discovery, in 1598. The Dutch left Mauritius in 1710, but by then the dodo, and most of the large terrestrial vertebrates there had become extinct. Even though the rareness of the dodo was reported already in the 17th century, its extinction was not recognized until the 19th century. This was partly because, for religious reasons, extinction was not believed possible until later proved so by Georges Cuvier, and partly because many scientists doubted that the dodo had ever existed. It seemed altogether too strange a creature, and many believed it a myth. The bird was first used as an example of human-induced extinction in Penny magazine in 1833 period 87. Physical remains. 17th century specimens. Leg and skull fragments in the National Museum of Prague. The only extant remains of dodos taken to Europe in the 17th century are a dried head and foot in the Oxford University Museum of Natural History, a foot once housed in the British Museum but now lost, a skull in the University of Copenhagen Zoological Museum, and an upper jaw and leg bones in the National Museum, Prague. The last two were rediscovered and identified as dodo remains in the mid-19th century. Other stuffed dodos were mentioned in old museum inventories, but none are known to have survived. Plaster casts of the Oxford head and the London foot made when they were still intact, Booth Museum of Natural History. The only known soft tissue remains, the Oxford head, specimen OUM 11605, and foot, belong to the last known stuffed dodo, which was first mentioned as part of the Tradescan collection in 1656. And was moved to the Ashmolean Museum in 1659. It has been suggested that this might be the remains of the bird that Hayman Lestrange saw in London. Many sources state that the museum burned the stuffed dodo around 1755 because of severe decay, saving only the head and leg. Statute 8 of the museum states that, as any particular grows old and perishing, the keeper may remove it into one of the closets, or other repository, and some other to be substituted. The deliberate destruction of the specimen is now believed to be a myth. It was removed from exhibition to preserve what remained of it. This remaining soft tissue has since degraded further. The head was dissected by Strickland and Melville, separating the skin from the skull in two halves. The foot is in a skeletal state, with only scraps of skin and tendons. Very few feathers remain on the head. It is probably a female, as the foot is 11% smaller and more gracile than that of the London specimen, yet appears to be fully grown. The dried London foot, first mentioned in 1665, was long displayed in the British Museum next to Savory's Edward's dodo painting. And it too was dissected by Strickland and Melville. By 1896 it was mentioned as being without its integuments, and only the bones are believed to remain today. Its present whereabouts are unknown. Skull in the Zoological Museum of Copenhagen. The Copenhagen skull, specimen ZMUC 92-806, is known to have been part of the collection of Bernardus Paludanus in Enkhuizen, until 1651, when it was moved to the museum in Gottorp Castle, Schleswig. After the castle was occupied by Danish forces in 1702, the museum collection was assimilated into the Royal Danish Collection. The skull was rediscovered by J. T. Reinhardt in 1840. It is 13 millimeters shorter than the Oxford skull, and may have belonged to a female. It was mummified, but the skin has perished. Its sclerotic ring is preserved. The front part of the skull, specimen NMPP6V-004389, and some leg bones in the National Museum of Prague were found in 1850 among the remains of the Boemisches Museum. It may be what remains of one of the stuffed dodos known to have been at the menagerie of Emperor Rudolph II. Possibly the specimen painted by Hefnagel or Savory there. Apart from these remains, a dried foot was mentioned by Carolus Glucius in 1605, but is now lost. It belonged to the Dutch Professor Pieter Pauw, and its provenance is unknown. It may have been collected during the Van Neck voyage. Subfossil specimens. Until 1860, the only known dodo remains were the four incomplete 17th century specimens. Philip Bernardayers found the first subfossil bones, which were sent to Richard Owen, at the British Museum, who did not publish the findings. In 1863, Owen requested the Mauritian Bishop Vincent Tryon to spread word that he should be informed if any dodo bones were found. In 1865, George Clark, the government schoolmaster at Mahabourg, finally found an abundance of subfossil dodo bones in the swamp of Maroc Songs in southern Mauritius, after a 30-year search inspired by Strickland and Melville's monograph. In 1866, Clark explained his procedure to the Ibis, an ornithology journal. He had sent his schoolies to wade through the center of the swamp, feeling for bones with their feet. At first they found few bones, until they cut away herbage that covered the deepest part of the swamp, where they found many fossils. The swamp yielded the remains of over 300 dodos, but very few skull and wing bones, possibly because the upper bodies were washed away, or scavenged while the lower body was trapped. The situation is similar to many finds of moa remains in New Zealand marshes. The skeleton Richard Owen assembled from bones found in the Maroc Songs. Clark's reports about the finds rekindled interest in the bird. Sir Richard Owen and Alfred Newton both wanted to be first to describe the postcranial anatomy of the dodo, and Owen bought a shipment of dodo bones originally meant for Newton, which led to rivalry between the two. Owen described the bones in Memoir on the Dodo in October 1866, but erroneously based his reconstruction on the Edwards dodo painting by Savory, making it too squat and obese. In 1869 he received more bones and corrected its stance, making it more upright. Newton moved his focus to the Reunion solitaire instead. The remaining bones not sold to Owen or Newton were auctioned off or donated to museums. Subfossil bones rediscovered in the Grant Museum in 2011. In 1889, Theodore Saussure was commissioned to explore the historical souvenirs of Mauritius and find more dodo remains in the Maroc Songs. He was successful and also found remains of other extinct species. A barber named Louis Etienne Thiroux also found many dodo remains around 1900, which are now lost. They included the first remains of a juvenile and the first articulated specimen. It is unknown exactly where he made his finds, except that some were found in a cave, which may have been located on the slopes of Lipus Mountain. In October 2005, after 100 years of neglect, a part of the Maroc Songs swamp was excavated by an international team of researchers. To prevent malaria, the British had covered the swamp with hardcore during their rule over Mauritius, which had to be removed. Many remains were found, including bones of at least 17 dodos, in various stages of maturity, though no juveniles, and several bones obviously from the skeleton of one individual bird, which have been preserved in their natural position. These findings were made public in December 2005, in the Naturalis Museum in Leiden. 63% of the fossils found in the swamp belonged to turtles of the extinct Cheilondraspis genus, and 7.1% belonged to dodos, which had been deposited within several centuries, 4,000 years ago. Subsequent excavations suggested that dodos and other animals became mired in the Maroc Songs while trying to reach water during a long period of severe drought about 4,200 years ago. Though many small skeletal elements were found during the recent excavations of the swamp, few were found during the 19th century, probably due to the employment of less refined methods when collecting. In June 2007, adventurers exploring a cave in Mauritius discovered the most complete and best preserved dodo skeleton ever found. The specimen was nicknamed Fred, after the finder. Worldwide, 26 museums have significant holdings of dodo material, almost all found in the Maroc Songs. The Natural History Museum, American Museum of Natural History, Cambridge University Museum of Zoology, the Senckenberg Museum, and others have almost complete specimens assembled from these dissociated subfossil remains. In 2011, the wooden box containing dodo bones from the Edwardian era was rediscovered at the Grant Museum at University College London during preparations for a move. They had been stored with crocodile bones until then. The white dodo. Royal and Savoury painting with the whitish dodo, in the lower right, 1611. The supposed white dodo or solitaire of Reunion is now considered an erroneous conjecture based on contemporary reports of the Reunion ibis and 17th century paintings of white dodo, like birds by Pieter Woodhouse and Pieter Halston, that surfaced in the 19th century. The confusion began when Wilhelmus Branson Bonteco, who visited Reunion around 1619, mentioned fat, flightless birds that he referred to as dodiersen in his journal, though without mentioning their coloration. When the journal was published in 1646, it was accompanied by an engraving of a dodo from Savoury's Crocker Art Gallery sketch. The white, stocky, and flightless bird was first mentioned as part of the Reunion fauna by Chief Officer J. Tatton in 1625. Sporadic mentions were subsequently made by Sieur de Bois and other contemporary writers. Baron Edmond de Seely's Longchamps coined the name Raphis solitarius for these birds in 1848, as he believed the accounts referred to a species of dodo. When 17th century paintings of white dodos were discovered by 19th century naturalists, it was assumed they depicted these birds. Anthony Cornelis Aldemont suggested that the discrepancy between the paintings and the old descriptions was that the paintings showed females and that the species was therefore sexually dimorphic. Some authors also believe the birds described were of a species similar to the Rodriguez solitaire, as it was referred to by the same name, or even that there were white species of both dodo and solitaire on the island. Pieter Halston's painting of a white dodo, mid-1600s. The Pieter Woodhouse painting, which was discovered first, appears to be based on an earlier painting by Pieter Halston, 3 versions of which are known to have existed. According to Hume, Cheek, and Valador de Lozoya, it appears that all depictions of white dodos were based on Royal and Savoury 1611 painting Landscape with Orpheus and the animals, or on copies of it. The painting shows a whitish specimen, and was apparently based on a stuffed specimen then in Prague. The Walvagel described as having a dirty off-white coloring was mentioned in an inventory of specimens in the Prague collection of the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, to whom Savoury was contracted at the time, 1607-1611. Savoury's several later images all show greyish birds, possibly because he had by then seen another specimen. Keck and Hume believe the painted specimen was white due to albinism. Valador de Lozoya has instead suggested that the light plumage was a juvenile trait, a result of bleaching of old taxidermy specimens, or simply artistic license. In 1987, scientists described fossils of a recently extinct species of ibis from Reunion, with a relatively short beak, Borbonibus latypes, before a connection to the solitaire reports had been made. Keck suggested to one of the authors, François Moutou, that the fossils may have been of the Reunion solitaire, and this suggestion was published in 1995. The ibis was reassigned to the genus Threscornis, now combined with the specific epithet solitarius, from the binomial R. solitarius. Birds of this genus are also white and black with slender beaks, fitting the old descriptions of the Reunion solitaire. No fossil remains of dodo, like birds, have ever been found on the island. Cultural significance. John Tenniel's 1865 illustration of Alice and the dodo. The dodo's significance as one of the best-known extinct animals, and its singular appearance led to its use in literature and popular culture as a symbol of an outdated concept or object, as in the expression dead as a dodo, which has come to mean unquestionably dead or obsolete. Similarly, the phrase to go the way of the dodo means to become extinct or obsolete, to fall out of common usage or practice, or to become a thing of the past. In 1865, the same year that George Clark started to publish reports about excavated dodo fossils, the newly vindicated bird was featured as a character in Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. It is thought that he included the dodo because he identified with it and had adopted the name as a nickname for himself because of his stammer, which made him accidentally introduce himself as Dodo Dodgson, his legal surname. 87. The book's popularity made the dodo a well-known icon of extinction. Today, the dodo appears frequently in works of popular fiction and is used as a mascot for many kinds of products, especially in Mauritius. The dodo appears as a supporter on the coat of arms of Mauritius. It is also used as a watermark on all Mauritian rupee banknotes. A smiling dodo is the symbol of the Brasseries de Bourbon, a popular brewer on Reunion, whose emblem displays the white species once thought to have lived there. The dodo is used to promote the protection of endangered species by many environmental law organizations, such as the Darrell Wildlife Conservation Trust and the Darrell Wildlife Park. In 2011, the Nephilat spider Nephilengese dodo, which inhabits the same woods as the dodo once did, was named after the bird to raise awareness of the urgent need for protection of the Mauritius biota. The name dodo has also been immortalized by scientists naming genetic elements, honoring the dodo's flightless nature. A fruit fly gene within a region of a chromosome required for flying ability was named dodo. In addition, a defective transposable element family from Phytophthora infestans was named Adopi, as it contained mutations that eliminated the element's ability to jump to new locations in a chromosome. Previously unpublished 17th century illustration of a dodo sold at Christie's in 2009. In 2009, a previously unpublished 17th century Dutch illustration of a dodo went for sale at Christie's and was expected to sell for $6,000. It is unknown whether the illustration was based on a specimen or on a previous image. It sold for $44,450. The poet Hilaire Belloc included the following poem about the dodo in his Bad Child's Book of Beasts from 1896. The dodo used to walk around and take the sun and air. The sun yet warms his native ground. The dodo is not there. The voice which used to squawk and squeak is now forever dumb. Yet may you see his bones and beak all in the museum.